views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect the views of BronxNet or the program underwriters.
Good evening and welcome to Bronx Talk. It's going on in our churches, in our schools, in our streets, in our movie theaters, in our homes, and it's happening in every city and every state and in every town in America. I'm talking about people getting killed by guns. Last week, a terrible and, like so many others, completely preventable tragedy unfolded in Virginia as a former co-worker who was easily and legally able to get hold of a gun in what was nothing short of a terrorist attack, shot and murdered a TV news reporter, a cameraman, and then himself. And then just days later, a police officer in Texas was gunned down in cold blood. I don't know about you, but I can't be silent about this. Folks, it's enough already. We got to get the guns off our streets and out of our neighborhoods, especially in the Bronx. The Daily News had a cover page that said since the December 2012 Connecticut shooting of school children in their school, more than 84,000 people have been killed by guns in the United States. 84,000. In fact, the Mass Shooting Tracker website shows that this year alone, there have been 255 mass shootings, which means 4 people or more shot. There have been 885 mass shootings since that terrible Sandy Hook school massacre. Think of how insane that all is. And when I said before that last week's terrorist shooting was a preventable act, I mean that. We need to change our laws, change our minds, and make a collective commitment that this is no longer acceptable, and we can get these guns off our streets. Tonight we have the director of New Yorkers Against Gun Violence with us, as well as a Bronx mom who unspeakably lost her son to gun violence. We'll also check in with the Jacoby Hospital doctor, part of the Stand Up to Violence campaign, who can talk further about prevention. If you want to talk about guns, the phone number is 718-960-7261, and you can call in or send them in an email at bronxtalk@bronxnet.org or post them on the Bronx Talk Facebook page, and we'll read them on the air during a future edition of our program. For the here and now, it is the executive director of New Yorkers Against Gun Violence. Welcome to Leah Barrett. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
And from Bronx Families of Murdered Children, it's Patricia Solomon. Thank you for joining us. We appreciate your time, and for you, certainly great sympathy for your loss. I know it was several years ago, but that I'm sure the pain is still ripe and rich. Yes. Ms. Barrett, also, I just found out before the show, you also lost a relative to
my brother in 1997.
So, and certainly we all extend sympathies. So where are we at? Why don't we have guns off our streets? Why do we have these just horrible numbers and daily incidents all across the country, not only here in the Bronx?
Well, we're not doing a very good job nationally of keeping guns out of the wrong hands, and really that's what gun regulation should be about. We don't want guns falling into the hands of dangerous people who might have a violent tendency, anger issues, as the shooter in Roanoke did, the seriously mentally ill, violent felons, and certainly we don't want the guns in the hands of children. So we need to regulate who gets them. And our federal gun laws are very weak. The last federal law that actually strengthened gun regulations in the United States was 1993. The Brady Bill, which required background checks, criminal background checks on anyone who bought a gun from a firearms dealer, a licensed dealer. But that left lots of other gun sales without background check requirements. For example, any private sales at gun shows, sales on the internet, which is now a very, very big forum for selling guns. So we need to do a better job. We need to pass criminal background checks for all gun sales. And New York is a great model for the rest of the country because we've had licensing and registration for handguns in this state for a long time. And then in 2013, after Sandy Hook, we passed the SAFE Act, which actually closed the private sale loophole so that all sales now have to undergo a federal background check. And so it does a good job relative to other states of keeping guns out of dangerous hands. The problem we have here in New York is that guns are trafficked in from places like Virginia and Georgia and Florida, which have very weak laws, into our state, and not just into New York City, but upstate as well.
It's almost like a chain is as strong as its weakest link. So if there's
That's
a weak
right.
link somewhere else, I mean, I don't want to give anybody any crazy ideas, but you could drive somewhere else and bring a gun into New York.
Of course.
And it's relatively easy to do that, unfortunately. Why don't we have stronger laws? I mean, when I read the news, I mean, I'll just give you can open up any newspaper in this country and any day. I mean, I live in New York, so here's right out of the Daily News. This was yesterday. A crazed gunman shot a 27-year-old man on a Bronx street early Saturday, then clipped a 25-year-old woman with his vehicle as he made a hasty getaway. I mean, this is just ripped it right out of the newspaper. Why can't we stop this? Every person would read this and say this is ridiculous. Why don't we get these guns out of here?
Well, I think federally we don't have strong gun laws because not enough people like us are standing up and demanding that our elected officials do something about this and pass some common sense, smart gun laws to keep guns out of the wrong hands. And the National Rifle Association is very well organized. It's been around for a long time, and it can mobilize its very vocal minority group of members. There are 4 million members of the NRA. There are 300 million Americans, though.
Well, this is what I'm asking. They seem to be
And our politicians.
strangely powerful over the vast numbers in all the polls. I think the latest was that 70% of Americans looking for better gun control.
Yeah, well, our politicians, unfortunately, are in the pocket of the NRA. They're being intimidated. They have no spine. They're looking after the interests of an industry lobby that all it cares about is making money and selling more guns.
I have to tell you, and folks know a lot of times I try to play it straight, but I've had it. We got to get these guns out of here. That is an extraordinary thought that a politician or anybody would be more interested in campaign contributions than keeping someone like Ms. Solomon from losing her son. Would you briefly tell us, I don't want to make it more difficult for you, but what were the circumstances around your son's death? And this was in the Bronx?
Yes, it was.
When was it?
It was in 1996.
Okay.
In July. It seems that he was going to the store, from what I understand, and somebody tried to rob him. Mm-hmm. And they shot him. How I know how many shots is because I was at the trial of the young man, and he was shot 5 times, 3 in the back and 2 in the head. Mm-hmm. And I still don't understand how the jury decided that this person was not guilty
Less
of
than
any of them.
human, if you don't mind my interjecting.
Yeah. That he was not. He was.
He was found not guilty.
Not guilty.
And
on
he's
all
still
5
out
charges.
there somewhere.
Yes.
From 1997.
96.
You have worked with a group of other people who have lost family members in the
Yes.
Bronx. Tell me about the work that you're doing.
I'm the leader for the Parents of Murdered Children in the North Bronx, Westchester chapter. Mm-hmm. And all of the people that come to our sessions are mothers, sisters, fathers, and some people from the military. We have 2 families that I feel very strongly about. Their daughters got killed by their husbands who are soldiers. Yeah. And the soldier husband said that he was dry firing his gun, and that's what happened.
So this was accidental.
Supposedly.
You know what? I actually will ask both of you. You know, it's interesting that when there's a shooting that we hear about, whether it be a horrible story in South Carolina in a church, or a horrible story in Connecticut with school children, or in a movie theater, all these things that we hear about all the time. A Congress member in Arizona. I mean, the list is longer than any of us can remember. We always want to know where the gun came from, and I've determined after hearing that the less than human who shot that TV news reporter, he got his legally and someone else got it illegally. I'm starting to think, you know what, doesn't matter.
No.
We got to get them both off the street.
Yeah.
I mean, you're undoubtedly you agree with that. I'm starting to realize it doesn't matter if he got it legally, that's a problem, and if he got it illegally, that's also a problem.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, you know, we have about 300 million guns. We don't know how many guns we have in this country. And even here in New York State, there is data. The Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms traces crime guns. They do that for every state and every locality. So we know that in New York State, for example, where these guns are coming from. The law enforcement agencies know. But we can't get our hands, New Yorkers Against Gun Violence, and we've been around for 22 years on the advocacy front, we can't get our hands on this data. So we're on the verge of foiling it to get it. Because unless you know where those guns are coming from, like which gun stores...
Well, shouldn't all the guns be tracked, that every gun that is sold in America, or sold anywhere, but certainly in America, then we should know who's selling it, who's buying it, and have it registered, much like you do with your automobile.
Right,
If you
exactly.
track, you sell your automobile.
Clearly we should.
There's an easy paper trail to know where that... Right?
Yeah.
We should do that.
Well, the gun lobby's been very
Put that on.
successful.
Somebody make a note to that. Gary said...
They've been very successful in persuading Congress
Yes.
to, not enact anything along those lines. In fact, there's been a ban since 1996 on funding gun violence research. So we don't even know very much about guns. We don't know how many guns are out there, who has them, what guns are used in what crimes, under what circumstances.
I want to take the doctor from Jacoby in 1 second, but I want to just throw this out to both of you.
Yes.
Here's what you hear, and I posted the promotion of this program on Facebook, and a lot of people reacted. Guns don't kill people, people kill people. What's your thought about it? I mean, it was a person who pulled the trigger on your
Absolutely.
son.
And he didn't do it with his finger. He did it with a gun. And he was able to find a gun, purchase a gun, be given a gun to shoot someone. So, yes, guns do kill people with people behind them.
I assume you feel the same way.
Well, of course. I mean, guns empower you. They give you a sense of power. There have even been studies showing that men with a gun, their testosterone increases. So, let's face it, even if you're trying to kill yourself, you're going to succeed 90% of the time with a gun. And if you're going to kill someone else, the same goes for that. Unless if you use a knife or a baseball bat, you're not going to be as successful.
The problem is not guns, it's support for mental health services. That's something else. They said, don't bother our guns. We want to keep the guns, but
Pat and I both
people
know
who
that
are mentally challenged.
seriously mentally ill people are more likely to be victims than perpetrators of violence. So that's a red herring that the gun lobby loves to throw out. Sure, seriously mentally ill people shouldn't have access to guns, but most of us are going to suffer from mental illness at some point in our lives.
Of course.
The issue is just keeping guns out of the wrong hands. Licensing and registration, permit to purchase, like New York State has and 2 other states, is the way to keep guns out of the wrong hands.
After we're going to speak to Dr. Sheldon Tepperman from Jacoby in a moment, but after we do that, I want to talk about what the possibilities of getting some of this legislation through, not only in New York, but maybe all over the country. Dr. Sheldon Tepperman, who is the Director of Trauma Surgery at Jacoby Medical Center. Good evening. Thank you for joining us.
Good evening, Gary.
So you are with Stand Up to Violence. We have done programs on it, and we've certainly supported everything you folks are doing. What's your perspective when you hear the kind of dialogue we're having tonight that seems like everybody says, well, we want to get these guns off the streets. Why are we not having them on the streets, and what's the effect of it that you see literally every night and even now while you're on call?
Well, Gary, I was listening to a little bit early. It was a little choppy on the Internet, and so I've been associated with or a board member of New Yorkers Against Gun Violence for a decade and a half. And I tell you that we had an opportunity in this country after the Newtown, Connecticut shooting that you just referred to. It really was a pause or an inflection point in our culture. we as a nation took a deep breath and sort of paused together and said we were going to do something, and nationally we did nothing. So to be honest, I'm not sure if nationally we will really ever turn the tide, which is why folks like Leah, who's sitting there with you, and New Yorkers Against Gun Violence have sort of taken a hyper-local approach, and you have featured our Stand Up to Violence program. So we're going to have to do this, I think, one kid at a time, which is, so, I mentioned to you that I'm on call tonight, and actually just a few moments ago, several stab wound patients were brought in. It's very hot in the Bronx tonight. I'm not anticipating I'm going to get a lot of sleep, and hopefully bullets won't fly. But we have this opportunity, and it's a grant, as you know, through New York State Department of Criminal Justice Services, for any child that gets brought into the emergency room, and I would use the word child liberally, so we're going up to age 30. We look and see what the factors were in terms of why they were a victim of interpersonal violence. Is there a problem at home? Is there a need for mental health services? Is there gang involvement? And every single kid, I say that in parentheses, that comes into the building, we look at and we follow and we track. So because we're not going to be able to do this nationally, and we did have some success, and Leah helped fight for this with the New York State SAFE Act, but these guns are coming from out of state. So it's going to have to be a hyper-local approach, and we're going to do this one child at a time, because my worst nights are the nights that I have to go to a parent and tell them that their child is not going home because they're a victim of gun violence, and I have had too many of those worst nights.
Dr. Tepperman, what do you, how do you visualize kind of as a whole? Can you give me even just off the top of your head percentage of the number of shootings that you have, or the number of trauma cases, and how many of those are shooting? Can you get your arms around it and give me an idea?
Every trauma center, so we're a level 1 trauma center, and we are required to keep a database. It's called the Trauma Registry. So Jacoby has approximately 1,800 to 2,000 trauma admissions a year, and of those, and this varies from year to year, and it's actually been a little quieter in the last few years, we have between 150 and 200 gunshot victims that are admitted to Jacoby every year.
Out of how many did you say?
So out of 2,000. And another way of looking at this is the rates of penetrating trauma. That's how trauma centers look at how intense their urban violence is. And our penetrating trauma rate, that's stab wound, gunshots, is about 18%. So moderately busy, not as busy as some places like L.A. County or even Lincoln, which unfortunately is a lot busier with penetrating trauma.
Right. Dr. Tepperman, I don't want to keep you any further from your work, and what I'm really hoping is that we're going to let you go and you're going to say, gee, there's nothing to do tonight. So we're going to sit down and put your feet up and have a cup of coffee, and we'll have a quiet summer night in the Bronx. Wouldn't that be lovely?
That would be great. I'd appreciate that.
We do appreciate your time, and we certainly appreciate you taking a forward stance on gun violence.
Thank you, Gary. Hey, Leah, see you soon.
Thanks, Sheldon.
Right.
Thank you.
Great. I want to ask you a question. We're going to take another phone call in just a moment. After I posted this on Facebook, somebody wrote in, actually more than one person, well aware that I'm in New York City, and they said, you know what, will you cover on your program how homicides are higher in city and states with the strictest gun laws? So you said that New York State is doing very well. There are people out there that say, you know what, you still got gun laws, you still got gun problems in New York State, even though you have strict gun laws. What's your reaction to that?
Well, yes, I mean, as I said, we have weak federal laws, and many states have incredibly weak laws. Louisiana, where there was a theater shooting earlier this summer, they have some of the worst gun laws in the country. I mean, if you have a pulse, you can get a gun. So, I mean, the nice thing about New York is that we have permits, and you have to get a permit to have a handgun through your local law enforcement, and they have to know you because it's locally done. And the problem is these guns are trafficked in. They come in on the Chinatown bus. They come in on Amtrak. They come in the trunks of cars from Pennsylvania, from Florida, from Georgia, from Virginia, from all these states that have really, really bad gun laws.
Ms. Solomon, what have you learned over your years of working with this Bronx group? Is there something that's surprising or unusual, or something that you would want to share with us that has kind of changed your mind or focused your mind?
Well, not changed my mind, but most of my members, their children are young, 15 to 25. My son was the oldest, one of the oldest, 37. But what we've learned is that our children, they weren't in. Most of them were not in gangs. Mm-hmm. Most of them were not in gangs. They were at some place at the wrong time. Wrong place.
Wrong time.
Yeah. So what I feel is that now we've gone through the high school. I think we need to go to elementary school and start talking to kids.
And start from scratch.
Start from scratch.
And it's not funny. It's not a game. This is not a toy.
And these games that they're playing where they're shooting and the blood is shooting out of them on TV, it desensitizes our kids.
Yeah. Well, and when you read this 40 times in the newspaper every single day, unfortunately, I think it also desensitizes us. Our buddy Mark from Pelham Parkway is on the phone. Nice to talk to you, Mark. How are you? Do we have Mark?
Yes.
There we go. How are you?
Hey, Gary, I got you. Hold on.
Hold on. I'm doing a TV show here.
I got a couple of things to say about this.
Go ahead.
In the 2002 Safe Streets Act, there was a bill that they passed where they could put smart chips onto guns. And New Jersey came very close about 2 years ago of voting. And the interesting thing about the laws with the smart chips are we're living in the scientific age where the gun is programmed strictly to the gun buyer's hand. So if you steal a gun or anything, nobody else can use it. It's not something that can be reprogrammed right now.
Just like you do with your cell phone, right?
Exactly.
No, I'm talking through my regular home phone, actually.
Well, no. What I said, you could do the same thing with your cell phone. When your cell phone gets stolen, the thing is cut off.
Right, exactly. And
it's a great idea.
The thing about the law that even Jeff Klein didn't know about when I brought it up at meetings or various other things was that the first state that passes the law, all the other 49 states have to follow suit within a year and a half.
Why is that?
And the thing I've brought it up is because even police officers have been killed with their own guns. So if somebody got a police officer's gun, they couldn't even use it against them.
What great. Listen, anything that works, I'm for. So,
and the other
Mark,
thing
thank you so much.
Seriously, is look how many of the Bronx congressmen get money from the NRA. Look at that. I've looked it up. Every congressman who represents people in the Bronx gets money from the NRA.
Although the Congress members in the Bronx, and I know them all personally.
Crowley, Engel.
Yes, but they have all been pretty good on gun control.
Yeah, what they say is one thing, but look at the two companies. Look at their donors, and you'll find out who they're getting their money from.
Mark, this was one of your best phone calls after all these years.
Well, thank you. That's one of my best, but that's getting the hell out of it.
Great.
Because in Canada and England, you get caught with a gun, you're going bye-bye for a very long time.
Thank you very much.
That's without even committing a crime.
All right, thank you. Ms. Barrett, what do you think of that?
He makes a very good point. And when we have smartphones, so why not smart guns? The technology is definitely out there. When a German company...
We don't have the commitment, unfortunately.
Well, and these people who've actually tried to introduce smart guns in California and Maryland have been hounded out of business by these, I'll say the word, gun nuts, because they are completely bonkers. And the NRA unleashes them, and they go and they intimidate.
Yeah. I want to answer my own question just with some numbers. Because I was personally challenged on Facebook, and I want to respond to it, and that the numbers show that in Hawaii it was 2.6 deaths per 100,000 due to gun violence. In New York and New Jersey, it was 5 and 5.2 gun deaths out of 100,000 people. In Louisiana, it was 20.2 gun deaths. In Mississippi, 18.5. In Alaska, 17.8. Arizona, 15.1. So this idea that if you have tough gun laws, it's not helping you is wrong. It's wrong. Yeah. It's not accurate, et cetera, et cetera.
I'm glad you brought that up because actually New York has the third lowest gun death rate in the nation.
That's right. And
because we have tough gun laws.
What disturbs me, I have to tell you, is this misinformation campaign that just, when I said on that Facebook page, I said something like there were 885 mass shootings since 2012. They said that's a lie, and they brought up some statistics that just made no sense. Yeah. Anyway, we're about to run out of time.
Okay.
Ms. Solomon, just your conclusion, your final message. What do you want to tell people at the end of this?
It's so hard to say what I really feel like I want to say.
Well, you got 15 seconds, so say it.
I think guns are not necessary in the city, in the city of New York, because we have people, law enforcement, and I think that we need to have more education then we need to have guns.
All right, education is certainly high on our priority list. Ms. Barrett, your final word. If people want more information or want to sign up, what do they do?
They can go to our website, which is www.nyagv.org. And I want to say Senator Klein is a sponsor of Nicholas's Law in the Senate, which didn't get a vote on this year, but it passed the Assembly. That would require gun owners to lock up their guns to protect children and prevent them from being stolen, brought to school. A very important bill. So, and I also want to give a shout out to Carl Hastie, the Speaker, because he was responsible for bringing Nicholas's Law to the floor in the Assembly, and it passed. So thank you.
Listen, we're done. No more guns. Get them out of here.
Yes.
Anything you can do, anybody you can tell, any group you can join, as loud as you can shout, that's what I'm doing tonight. We got to get them out of here. We got to make the commitment and get the guns out of here. We agreed?
Yes, we are.
All right.
Make
If you
your
have
voices
further
heard.
comments or questions on anything you heard on the program, you can send us an email at bronxtalk@bronxnet.org or put them on our Facebook page, and we'll read them on the air during a future edition of our program. Now, the school year is starting, and next week we're going to clue you into a fundamental problem in our schools that you might not have thought about, and that is chronic absenteeism. We can't get anywhere if the kids don't come to school. So that'll be our topic next week. The borough president will be here for our 1,000th show on September 21st. Make a note of that, and we'll talk all about the borough of the Bronx. Thanks to Dahlia and Shirley and everybody else who's in the studio and in the control room, and to these folks, and we'll see you next week.
Thank you, Gary.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Stay
Thank
there,
you.
don't go in. They're going to roll the credits, and we'll pretend we're
You got plans?
You bet. $50 million Americans struggle with hunger, but we can do something about it.
Excuse me. What's going on?
Dinner. Please join me in helping put food on their tables. Together, we can feed America.
You guys keep going. I'm gonna get the plates.
Plates?
Find your local food bank at feedingamerica.org/hunger.
Live with a human for a while, and you get to know a few things. Like, I know she does strange tricks for no treats. But the one thing I will never for the life of me know is how she gets so tiny and inside that box. Natalie, how do you get so tiny?
A single ember that escapes from a wildfire can travel more than a mile. You can't control where that ember will land, only what happens when it does. Get Fire Adapted now at fireadapted.org.
There's no place like home.
Getting home safely is just a click away. But making sure your child is in the right seat is just one of the steps down the road to safer travels.
I don't know how it works.
Find the right seat for your little one's age and size.
We know what you told us.
There's no better way to get home safely. Know for sure that your child is in the right seat. Get all the facts at safercar.gov/the right seat. Brought to you by the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration and the Ad Council.
A full life, measured in seats, starts with the right ones early on. Car crashes are a leading